Hey everybody, and welcome back to our scenario playthrough series. We are on scenario number 9 today. This is Dinky Park, or Pokey Park, depending on where in the world you are from. We've got a pretty nice little park right here to start. It's actually really pleasant, but our goal is to develop this out to 100,000 park value by year 2. So since it's only year 2, we're going to do this whole thing in one video, so buckle up because it's going to be a longer one. We can buy a lot of land on the other side of the road, but we're not going to do that because we want a little bit of a challenge. It's a sort of a shame because I actually really like kind of the quaint setup of this park. It's actually super pleasant, but in order to get that 100,000 park value, it's going to have to be a little more compact. So we're going to end up doing this with terracing and layering, but we're still going to try and keep that slightly realistic touch that we've been trying to go to before. I think we're going to have to think of this mountaintop, or I guess hilltop, it's not really that big, but we're going to have to think of this hilltop almost as sort of built layers that have, structures that rides sit on top of, and then the pathways kind of go in more or less the basement, per se. It's easier to think about it that way than saying that this is just all one big mound of land that's got stuff underneath of it. But since RCT1 buildings are also land, you can think of it however you want. So we're going to get started here by rearranging some stuff, and I will give a caveat that before I did stream this one, I did practice it a little bit, only because I had some ideas about what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to spend the entire scenario build just kind of sitting there wasting it. So we are working a little bit from my plan, although we do deviate fairly substantially here towards the end. But first things first is I'm raising up a section in kind of the upper portion of the park where the carousel was originally to build some stuff there, but I need to first research a coaster for that. We're building this carousel here on this upper section, so that's kind of the top terrace here, and beneath it we can stick some food stalls and things like that, and now we can delete that first carousel there. There's a lot of little darty movements on this one, so I apologize if the camera is going all over the place, but this one's more than a lot of these. It's a little bit challenging to really look at everything on this because it's just large enough that we got to move around a little bit more and kind of spin to see all the different stuff. The goal for me on this park build is really to develop a clear path layout that doesn't end up having too many dead ends, that doesn't feel totally crammed in there. I mean, it's going to feel very tight, it's just part of it, but I want to at least do what I can to make it feel sort of somewhat natural anyway, so we'll see how that goes. So we have this kind of lower level that we've created, and I want to get this pathway underneath of it, so we're going to lower it right there down to the food stalls, and then we've kind of got that mid-tier going on to the Ferris wheel and to the swinging ship on the other side, so eventually those are all going to connect up. But now we have researched the looping coaster, which is the big thing that I wanted to put in. When I saw this park originally, with the kind of compact nature of it, one of the first things that I thought of is, wouldn't it be cool to have like a fairground Schwarzkopf style roller coaster here? And that's what we're going to build. So when I said that I had done some practicing on this one, this layout is something that I had initially built just kind of practicing to see what I could get into a small space. I love doing these traveling coaster type layouts, and I've got a lot of them, and they're often quite a bit larger than this. Actually, they're all quite a bit larger than this, because you really need more space to do it, super realistically. But in this instance, I was able to cram some stuff in here in a pretty small space, and it's still relatively realistic. We got a couple of kind of tight sloped corners there that aren't going to do great for our ratings, but it'll still be just fine in the end, and I think it works all right as far as the overall layout goes. So I'm pretty happy with it, and it's kind of a nice signature element to this park. It's kind of fun that they would use maybe a quarter of their overall space to put this one roller coaster, but it's a signature ride for sure. It would be kind of neat to come up on the road and see this thing towering over top of everything else. So now we've got this right here at the entrance, and this should bring in some good value into the park. Although one of the things that we're going to be fighting this entire time is the depreciation of park value. Even though we only have 2 years for the build, these things do age and depreciate over time. So the problem is we don't have a lot of space, but we kind of have to keep building in order to make it work. And we could replace these later on in the build and get basically new park value out of them, but I'm trying to kind of avoid that. It feels a little bit cheating, so we're going to avoid doing that, and we're not looking to crush the goal, we're just looking to meet the goal. So I wanted to make a little square here, because one of the things that is, I don't know, important to me, I guess, in a scenario like this is making sure that we have little squares and stuff like that, just to have some seating areas and have some spaces to give guests a little bit of space to rest. Since with RCT1 you can't really do double wide paths and large plazas and things like that, these sorts of like squares with a planter or a fountain or whatever it is in the middle of it, those tend to kind of take the place of that, I guess, just from in my mind anyway. The guests don't really care, but when you think about it from a park layout standpoint, pathway layouts are kind of like a beat. So you want to make sure that, when people are trying to move quickly through a space, it's sort of narrow and direct to the space, but when we want people to slow down, we kind of meander it a little bit, we widen the path, we make it a little larger, we put seating areas, we cluster buildings around it. So you tend to want those sorts of things when you think about pathway layouts. And to me, pathway layouts are super important just in general if you're looking at park design. We don't really have the luxury of doing a whole heck of a lot here, but we're going to still make the best of it. So we've been building a junior boomerang here just because this is about the best kind of ride you can put in this area, because you get double the track length, because you go forwards and backwards. Trying to make it realistic, we're going to stick that underneath of the carousel, but over top of that lower pathway, so we've got another tier, or terrace, I guess, in there. We want to get that straight lift hill on the way back. We can certainly curve it, and we can certainly save space doing that, but again, realistically, you don't see those curved, so we're not going to do it that way. And this is based off of the Vekoma family boomerangs, which we've been doing in a lot of these scenarios, and I understand that it's probably getting maybe a little tiresome, but I think they do fit very well in a lot of these builds. I thought the one in Katie's World ended up being pretty good as well, and this one works decently in this space too. I also kind of like how that lift hill goes right up there, up against the entrance there. So you got the big Schwarzkopf on the one side, you got the lift hill for the other one on the opposite side there. And we do have to lose our swinging ship as part of this, which is a little bit of a shame, and I would love to have put it back somewhere, but there wasn't really space. Now there was, at this point, still some space, but we're going to be very quick to fill those up. There we made a loop of our lower terrace up to the mid-height terrace, I guess. So now we've got a full loop of pathway. That's going to change quite a lot here by the time we're done. But for right now, it's done pretty well there. And I started to add a bunch of these hedges in because I liked the idea to just get some greenery in there, since we're really getting rid of a lot of the visual of the grass and everything that we started out with, this kind of nice garden space. So trying to balance that out just a little bit through that whole space, and finding some areas too to put some food stalls here and there. One thing I wanted to think of, though, is these hedges are basically guest height, and it could be construed that the guest can't really see over these, and it's probably the case, as they're kind of head height when you look at it. So I did want to replace some of them with some more see-through type fencing, just because I think it's going to end up looking a little better, and we can highlight those visuals that we want to give to the guests. Again, not that it really matters to the RCT peep as it stands, but I think it's still good design to think about it. So now we've unlocked our swinging inverter ship, which, as much as I don't really like building these, they are a great park value win, and if you put them back to back, we can do a lot with them. And at a 4x2 space for two of these side by side, you can't beat it. We still do need an entrance and an exit on either side. Really for any kind of ride here, you need a minimum of 3 spaces across to do something with it, because you need the platform, you need the entrance and exit, and then you need the queue and the exit platform. So we're going to do that here. Little tiny queue, which I don't love. I tend to at least like to have a little bit of queue in there, but we don't have a choice, unfortunately. Just the space is a little too tight. So we're going to stick that right there and give ourselves another bathroom down there too. And now we have 2 thrill rides here to really add to our park value and build that up a little bit. I want to come back through here and replace these fences like I said earlier, just to give that a little bit of a better viewing space. So you've got this whole section up here in the front that's blocked off by the observation tower and the slide on the top side. So there's a lot of things that we could do with this, such as build a car ride through there. You got go-karts unlocked. There's plenty of different things that can go into that space. So it was sort of a debate as to what fits into that space and what might make the most sense from a value standpoint to stick in there. In the meantime, I'm going to finish up this space up top, and I'm going to give this a sort of roof texture so it really fits into that whole, this is an upper level of some kind of a building. I'm going to give it some overgrowth on top too, like maybe the roof needs to be a little cleaned perhaps. But we aren't going to put a ton of stuff underground because I really don't want to bury everything underground because that feels like a little bit of cheating. So at this point, the Twitch chat is bullying me to put a wooden coaster into that space where the observation tower is, and this is not something that I had ever considered in any of my test builds. It was something that I had built initially as a wooden coaster before I had considered putting in the Schwarzkopf. But once the Schwarzkopf was in there, I was pretty firmly of the understanding that I was going to do a Schwarzkopf and a Vekoma and call it a day. No more coasters because you just really don't have the space for it, and all of the turns really cut off a lot of what you're working on as far as having space to build with those areas, since even the large turns really take a lot of space and much less a diagonal. As you all know from what I've said many a time, diagonals really do help the smoothness of your ride, but when you have a compact space like this, there's really not a lot of area to work with. But of course, chat won this argument, and we're going to try and fit a wooden coaster in here, which seems crazy to me because I want to have at least something that feels like a reasonably complete ride, but there's not a lot of space to do that, clearly. So what we have to do is do a lot of modification. We lose the Ferris wheel initially, which is something I really didn't want to do. It was not my favorite to lose that, but there's just nowhere else to put it at the moment. And in the end, we could have put it in a couple of spots, but it just didn't quite make sense. And I don't like putting rides right up adjacent to another ride. Like, I could have put this Ferris wheel right up against the carousel, but I just don't think it looks good in the game, so I wanted to avoid that. But as far as the wooden coaster goes, we are going to use this bit of terrain here for our first drop and kind of dive down here a little bit. And we're going to end up sort of kind of mirroring the Junior Boomerang here. I was trying for a minute to get a diagonal in there, and it just takes up so much space that it really didn't make any kind of sense to fit it into that area. So looking at kind of coming around and then coming back beside that observation tower to give us that sort of out and back feel, and then the thought process of, well, maybe we could stick a helix into this space. That was kind of the next thought, and see what we can fit into this area. So that was the next idea, which involved removing a lot of that pathway that we had previously added in. So we're going to temporarily go down to kind of a one-way access to that lower terrace, but we'll work on bringing that back here in a little bit. But you can do this. We can actually fit in that nice little helix there, and now we can come back to this side and turn around. But the problem now becomes, how do you get an entrance hut, an exit hut, turn this thing around, and get to some kind of a brake run? So initially the thought was, we just forego the brake run. We're going to run a single train here, and we'll just come into the station. We'll use the station brakes as the just brake run for the overall ride. But we still have a lot of space, and like I said before, I'm trying to avoid having a ton of underground stuff. Like, I'm cool with having a path network underground or kind of in these buildings, as we're calling them, but I'm not as cool with having a bunch of track going every which way underground, because it kind of feels like it's a cop-out almost to hide your making it work. But I think it's for us, it's important to, or at least for me, it's important to make sure that it's as readable as possible, and I don't like buried coaster track where we can avoid it. So we're going to really limit that to kind of a final turnaround and a brake run. Now I'm trying to figure out how to relocate the queue for the Junior Boomerang so that we can reuse that space up front and do a little bit of work there. I'm going to rescue some guests there that are a bit trapped in the middle terrace, but one of the things that we need to do here is move a station one more over so that we can get a turnaround. Because really, if you're side by side, you can get the turnaround with the 2x2 turn pieces. I guess those are the small turns, not the micro turns. But then you need a two of the diagonal pieces, the diagonal turn pieces, I guess the large turns, in order to actually get side by side again. So that takes up a lot of space because those diagonal turns, I think it's either 5 or 6 long in order to execute one of those kind of large S-bends as it was. So one of the thoughts here is if we can, we should move that station over one more, and then we only have to do a regular S-bend, which only takes 3 tiles. So now we're 5 tiles for a turnaround here, which is what we're trying to do here, now that we have moved the queue over. So here's where we're finding out that those diagonals just aren't going to work out super well. But the nice thing is we have a little bit of space there if we can move the whole thing down. So you'll notice that whole thing at the helix and everything is raised up just by 1. If we drop the whole thing down, we can actually make it work. If we put it basically on the ground, so this is more of like an older style wooden coaster that is built, pretty much the ledgers are right on the landscape, which is a thing. It's not a thing that I love to do, but it is a thing. But it allows us to move over the station, put an S-bend in there, and then we get this cute little 3-tile station, which means that we're going to have a tiny little train, but I think that still works. And now we got to just connect the 2 bits. Part of the problem with connecting the 2 bits is that the Junior Boomerang is now kind of in the way, so we got to modify this a little bit, and I didn't love the way that this modification turned out because we had to introduce a steep drop here, which while steep drops aren't out of the question on these, it just doesn't feel quite right. And then this turnaround now has this kind of fast double corner there to get to the 180 turnaround, and then the spike on the backside. So it feels a little forced, a lot forced, I guess. So I don't love it, but it is kind of what we have to deal with at this point. But now the wooden coaster is effectively done, and we somehow managed to fit it in a way that I don't think looks totally awful. Like, it's certainly a short coaster, but I don't think it is out of the question for what you would consider maybe a junior wooden coaster. So we're going to build our entrance and exit underneath the observation tower. I am going to avoid that center square directly underneath the tower, because if you think about it, that would be where most of the foundation would be for that tower itself. So think about it a little bit realistically there. Not crazy much, but that's part of it. Here we lose the topiaries in the 4 playing card suits that I really wanted to keep because, I don't know, to me that was sort of iconic of this particular park, and I didn't love getting rid of those, but we're going to try and put them back somewhere a little bit later. Now we've got sort of a mess of path right there, just trying to connect everything together, so it's just, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to kind of smooth that area out, and that's what we'll focus on here towards the tail end of this area, or this section. So we're into year 2. We don't have a ton of time left, but we are already over our park value, so we just got to hold it at this point. These drop towers are a good boost to that park value to help us ensure that it stays there. So if we lower a section here in the helix of this Junior Boomerang, we can fit one of these towers in, and I think it works pretty well in this space. We've got to fumble around at the queue a little bit here. One of the nice benefits is you can cantilever some pathway over here, over top of that station platform. Typically, I would avoid that only because the size of the carriage kind of looks like it overlaps with the pathway a little bit. Obviously, the game lets you do it, but just visually, it's kind of like tunnels in the game sometimes, where it clearly looks like you could be able to hit the tunnel if you have your hands up or whatever else. So just from a visual standpoint, I tend to avoid that kind of thing, but here we're just going to take the game's word for it that fits, and we're going to cantilever that pathway over just a little bit. In my test run, I'd actually built 2 towers down there side by side, but because we had to modify the Junior Boomerang, it didn't quite fit anymore exactly as I wanted it, and I don't think we need a 3rd tower in this park. I did extend that observation tower initially. I didn't mention that earlier, but I did extend that to be a little taller initially. I'm not entirely sure if that has really any bearing on our park value, but I figured why not, make it a little bit taller. As it turns out, that ends up being the only ride in this entire map that I didn't end up moving or adjusting in some way, so that is sort of the OG that stays in the right place the whole time, and I didn't really want to move it. The other flat rides I don't have as much of an issue about moving, but for whatever reason I just wanted to keep that one there as, sort of the tall icon of the scenario, and let's keep it. So now we're moving around some of the station platforms and or the entrance and exits and some queues to try and resolve this just absolute mess of pathway right here in the middle. And by adjusting it a little bit and by moving over the carousel queue, we can actually really resolve this in a pretty nice way, I think, in a way that doesn't make a ton of just messy path and things like that. It definitely has its kind of narrowness to it, which I think is fine. It can feel narrow. I just don't want it to feel like we're really having to stretch to get this pathway to fit where it really needs to go. But this lets us get our connection back, so now we have a loop once more, and it feels more complete, I think. So we've lowered the section down here. We can throw a bathroom down there too. We'll modify that a little further, and we can get back into our fences. Again, fences are our basically only theming in this instance because we've got some various types of that. So we got the hedges, we've got what we typically call the spooky fence, but the wrought iron fence with that brick base, and the mesh fence, as well as just some fountains and things like that, because I do want to make it feel at least like there's something going on with some theming and or just using some things for non-revenue generating tiles. We want to make sure that it's not just completely crammed in here. I just don't want this to be a giant slab of asphalt that we put stuff on. It needs to feel at least like kind of sort of you want to be there. So adjusting the freefall here just a little bit, giving some various queue adjustments and things. And we're actually going to end up adjusting the queue entirely by moving it to this side, moving that bathroom, and now we've got this entrance on the mid terrace there, which I guess was formerly the lower terrace, down to the lower level here with the tower. Gets us a queue removal from underneath the wooden coaster so that I can keep some of the supports there. I'm fairly cognizant about wanting to keep as many of these visible supports as we can, since we don't have custom scenery to put back the supports afterwards, or zero clearance or things like that. So I did want to maintain as best as possible as many of the supports as we can. So that's something to think about. When by removing that queue down there, we get some wooden coaster supports back. Also, by adjusting our pathway down there with that restroom, we can do a little bit of that too. So it cleans it up just a bit and just makes it feel a little nicer, I think. Feels like the ride's actually standing up on its own somehow. So we're actually going to demolish that restroom again because I realize we just don't have a lot of food stalls and things down here. So I'll drop one of the ice cream type stands down here initially, and until I realize that we can put it at an angle underneath of the junior boomerang. Gives us a little seating area down here, so I think that would be kind of a neat spot to go sit and enjoy your ice cream while watching two different coasters rocket around you. Feels like that would be a really cool spot for enthusiasts to sit and just enjoy it ourselves. So looking at a couple different colors here just to try and change it up a little bit. We did stick with all the flat rides except for the observation tower being white and red, just to try and fit the whole thing together. The coasters, we did some different colors too, so I think that looks pretty nice in the end. And now we're just kind of holding. We're into the end of August here, year 2, and we want to try and just maintain our campaign costs, or the park value anyway, and we are there. We just need to hold it, and at this point it's just kind of adding things to see where we can add it and making little improvements here and there. Adding more fences. You can see I put back the topiaries that we had removed earlier. I really did want those to get back, so we managed to fit it in there pretty well, I think. Here's one of the last big movements that we did, is actually put that last corner in a tunnel, and that lets us move our slide over top of that and push it towards the park boundary. and that actually frees up a whole lot of space here in the middle. And one of the things that lets us do is give ourselves a much better plaza. So this upper terrace now becomes a number of square plazas with stuff in the middle. Sometimes that stuff is the huts for the junior boomerang, but it just lets us make this feel a whole lot nicer, I think, and it makes it feel a lot larger because we've got a lot of people in here. You know, we're nearly at 700 guests, which is quite a lot for a park of this size, and I just don't want it to feel totally claustrophobic. So by putting in those fountains and a couple of the huts around there, we kind of have ourselves a little square in lieu of a midway of some kind. Then we'll change the texture of the pathway there, so I think it looks pretty nice for what we've got to work with there. So at this point, we've fit things in really well. You know, if I was ever to expand across, I would love to put a chairlift in here or something just to go over the road, turn around, and come back. But you can't do one-way chairlifts in the game without hacking, so we're going to avoid that just in general. But we're pretty darn close here to finishing up and winning, so we just got to finish here with a couple of fences and clean ourselves up just a little bit through here. And I think it turned out pretty well. We finally unlocked a drink stand at the very, very end because these people have been sustaining off of ice cream and salty foods, so I'm sure we've got some people having some troubles here now. But that's everything for the scenario as we take the victory here in just a second. So why don't we jump across and we'll look at the real-time portion, and then we'll do a little bit of before and after as well. So come along. And here we are with the completed Dinky Park. We sure filled this thing up. It's about as packed as I think we can get it. I'm not sure I could fit anything else in there. So let's take a spin around the park, starting from our entrance here, where we have our little plaza as you just first get in. There's a restroom behind the entrance building here. You go up to the upper terrace here, and we've got our spiral slide that is over the Return of the Wooden Coaster. We've got our Cloud 9 observation tower here in its original position. It's the only thing that stayed in one spot. Nice little plaza here with some food and stuff around it. Our relocated carousel. And then we have our Schwarzkopf coaster, which Twitch chat decided to name the Flying Purple People Eater. This one's got very high, medium stats. Lateral Gs are a little ridiculous, but that's totally expected with something like this, especially with some of these fast curving corners. But you know what? People are still lining up for it, so in the end, I don't really care. I think it looks pretty alright and feels fairly compact to get something of this size into this park, which is kind of the goal in the end of it. So we move a little further down, and we've got ourselves the Scrambler. We've got the double and swinging inverter ships on kind of that lower terrace there. We have our secondary pathway down to the bottom that we were able to work through. The entrance to the little junior boomerang right here, which Twitch chat decided to name the Dinkler for Dinky Park, I guess. High, medium, which is not too bad. I kind of figured this would have higher lateral Gs than it did, so I'll take it. We got our launch tower down here as well, and then of course our wooden coaster here that queues up underneath of the observation tower. This guy is medium, high, low, which is actually not too bad. We got a decent amount of coaster in there for the size. You get this little figure eight going on here, and then the return run, and then the final turnaround, and the S-bend getting back to the little tiny station that we've got there. So all in all, I think it did pretty well. I think I'm happy with it. So that is one complete, and probably one of the harder ones that we're going to tackle here for a little bit. Next up is Aqua Park. So keep an eye out for that one, and if you want to catch any of these on stream, twitch.tv/Amusement Academy for all of that, and you can find all the other links down in the description of the video for our Discord channel and all of the other things. If you do like these videos, please consider giving me a subscribe and come back for more. So until next time, thank you all very much for watching, and have a great day. Bye now.